Mercedes could lose one of its strongest starting positions in Hungary after the FIA opened a real investigation into championship leader Kimi Antonelli. He qualified fourth, just 272 thousandths of a second behind pole. Then Max Verstappen spun directly ahead of him. Yellow flags appeared. Antonelli lifted off the accelerator, but somehow still recorded his personal best sector through the affected area. And that one detail could send him backwards on the grid. Because under yellow flags, lifting slightly may not be enough. The FIA requires a clear, unmistakable reduction in speed, and the data has now placed Antonelli's entire qualifying result under scrutiny. But the situation gets worse. While Antonelli faces a possible grid penalty, George Russell's Mercedes has already stopped on the circuit for a cause that remains unconfirmed. Two Mercedes drivers. Two separate emergencies. One chaotic qualifying session. And both problems were triggered, directly or indirectly, by the same Verstappen spin. Subscribe to the channel, because the evidence Mercedes must now explain could completely transform Antonelli's Hungarian Grand Prix. The danger began before Antonelli reached the final corner. Qualifying had already entered its most unforgiving phase. Every driver was pushing for one last improvement. Every braking point mattered. Every fraction of a second could move a car forward or send it backwards. Antonelli had already placed his Mercedes fourth. He was only 272 thousandths of a second behind Lando Norris on pole. That was not a distant fourth place. That was a position close enough to matter. Close enough to attack. Close enough to place Mercedes directly inside the fight with McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull. And for Antonelli, the timing could not have been more important. He arrived in Hungary leading the Drivers' Championship by 45 points over Lewis Hamilton. He had won in Belgium only 1 week earlier. Momentum was on his side. Confidence was building. And another strong result in Hungary could have increased the pressure on every rival behind him. But then, in a few seconds, the entire situation changed. Max Verstappen entered the final corner ahead of him. The Red Bull turned in. Then the rear stepped away. Verstappen spun. Yellow flags appeared. And Antonelli arrived almost immediately. That is the moment the FIA began examining. Not because Antonelli caused the incident. He did not. Not because the Mercedes was illegal. There is no technical accusation against the car. The investigation exists because Antonelli reached a yellow flag zone while completing his final qualifying attempt. And somehow, despite the warning, he recorded his personal best sector. That is the contradiction Mercedes must explain. Antonelli reportedly lifted off the accelerator. He did react. But the FIA does not only ask whether the driver moved his foot. The FIA asks whether the reduction in speed was clearly noticeable. That standard matters. Because yellow flags are not suggestions. They are not reminders to become slightly more careful. They are warnings that the track ahead may be dangerous. A car may be stopped. The racing line may be blocked. A driver may be trying to recover. Debris may be present. Marshals may need to approach the circuit. The driver behind must create a visible safety margin. And when Antonelli's sector time appeared as his fastest of the session, the stewards immediately had a reason to question whether that margin was large enough. But this is where the story becomes more complicated. A personal best sector does not automatically prove Antonelli accelerated through the yellow flags. A Formula 1 sector covers a much larger area than the exact location of one incident. Antonelli may have been faster earlier in the sector. He may have built an advantage before reaching the final corner. He may then have lifted through the yellow flag zone and still finished the complete sector with his best time. That is possible. But the available source does not confirm whether that is what happened. It does not provide Antonelli's full throttle trace. It does not provide his exact speed reduction. It does not show how much time he gained before the yellow flag or how much he lost after seeing it. That is why the investigation matters. The stewards cannot judge the complete incident from the sector time alone. They must look deeper. Where did Antonelli first see the warning? How quickly did he react? How much did he lift? Was the speed reduction obvious? Was he prepared to stop if Verstappen's car moved back toward the racing line? Those details decide everything. Because a driver can technically lift without truly creating enough caution. Imagine driving toward a dangerous junction. You see a warning. You ease off the accelerator for 1 second, but you still arrive faster than ever before. You can honestly say you lifted. But the person judging the situation may still ask whether you slowed enough. That is exactly the problem Antonelli faces. The action may have happened. The effect may not have been sufficient. And that difference could cost him fourth place. A typical punishment for a confirmed yellow flag violation can involve losing positions on the starting grid. The source does not confirm that Antonelli received that penalty. The final consequence was still pending. But the possibility alone created a serious problem for Mercedes. Fourth place at the Hungaroring is extremely valuable. Antonelli would begin close to the front. He would have access to cleaner air. He could attack the leaders before the race settled into a rhythm. He could react to the strategies of Norris and Hamilton. He could use his championship position without being trapped inside a long train of cars. A penalty could take all of that away. The Hungaroring is not a circuit where losing several grid positions is easy to repair. The track is narrow. The corners follow one another. Passing opportunities are limited. A faster driver can spend lap after lap behind a slower car without finding a safe way through. And following another car creates another problem. The air becomes disturbed. The front tires lose grip. The car slides more. The temperatures rise. The driver must stay close enough to attack, while the car becomes harder to control because he is staying close. It is like trying to run behind someone through a narrow hallway. You may be faster. You may have more energy. But there is nowhere to go. That is why fourth place gave Antonelli control. A lower position would force him to react. He might need a more aggressive first lap. He might need an alternative tire strategy. He might need to overtake drivers who could defend for several laps. And every recovery move would create more risk. That is the brutal irony. Antonelli may be punished because the FIA believes he did not show enough caution. And that punishment could force him to take more risks during the race. But the championship changes the calculation again. Antonelli's 45-point lead gives him protection. One grid penalty would not immediately remove him from first place in the standings. But a championship lead is not only about the number. It is about control. When the leader starts near the front, he can manage the risk. He can watch the closest rival. He can protect points. He can choose when to attack. When the leader starts further back, control disappears. Traffic begins making decisions for him. Other drivers influence his tire temperatures. Strategy becomes reactive. The possibility of contact increases. One penalty can create several consequences. A lower starting position creates traffic. Traffic creates tire problems. Tire problems force an earlier pit stop. An earlier pit stop can place the driver behind more cars. Then a strong qualifying result becomes a recovery race. That is the chain Mercedes had to fear. And Lewis Hamilton was starting near the front. Hamilton had missed pole position by only 12 thousandths of a second. He was Antonelli's closest championship rival in the source. If Antonelli moved backwards, Hamilton would receive an immediate opportunity. Ferrari could fight for the win. Antonelli could be trapped in traffic. And the 45-point advantage could begin to shrink. Not because Antonelli lacked speed. Because one sector under yellow flags changed the entire shape of the weekend. That is why Mercedes needed more than a simple explanation. The team needed data. It needed to prove that Antonelli's reaction was clear. A small lift might be visible in the throttle trace. But the stewards could still ask whether the speed reduction was meaningful. Mercedes might point to the exact location where Antonelli lifted. The FIA might point to the personal best sector. Mercedes might argue that the time was gained before the yellow zone. The FIA might argue that the complete response still did not appear cautious enough. That is how a simple moment becomes a complex investigation. The driver remembers what he felt. The team sees detailed data. The stewards compare that data with the regulation. And the final decision may depend on fractions that viewers cannot see. But the regulation is intentionally strict. A yellow flag exists because the driver ahead may be vulnerable. Verstappen had just spun. His car could have moved unexpectedly. It could have rolled back toward the racing line. It could have left debris. Antonelli could not assume the danger had ended simply because the Red Bull was visible. He needed to approach with enough control to react again. That is the safety principle behind the investigation. And safety questions become even more serious when the approaching driver is still improving his sector. The number creates an uncomfortable image. Danger ahead. Yellow flags displayed. Fastest personal sector recorded. That sequence looks wrong. It demands explanation. But it does not prove guilt by itself. This distinction is important. Antonelli's personal best sector triggered attention. It did not automatically settle the case. The FIA still needed to understand the exact speed profile, the exact throttle reduction, the precise location of the yellow flags, and the amount of time Antonelli had to respond. He was directly behind Verstappen. That reduced his reaction time. He did not receive a long warning. He did not approach the incident from a distant part of the circuit. The spin happened in front of him during the most intense moment of qualifying. 1 second, Antonelli was chasing fourth place or better. The next, he was being judged on how quickly he abandoned that chase. That is a difficult situation for any driver. But Formula One safety rules do not disappear because the timing is unfair. Antonelli may not have caused the danger. He was still responsible for responding to it. That is why the FIA investigation was legitimate. And this is where Mercedes' weekend became even more difficult. Antonelli's case was not the team's only problem. George Russell had completed qualifying in 7th. Then, after crossing the finish line, his Mercedes stopped at turn 1. The cause was not confirmed in the available source. No verified engine failure. No verified electrical failure. No confirmed hydraulic issue. The car simply stopped. So Mercedes ended qualifying with 2 different forms of uncertainty. Antonelli's grid position was under review. Russell's car was under examination. One side of the garage had to deal with the FIA. The other had to deal with an unexplained technical problem. One incident threatened positions. The other threatened reliability. And both arrived during the same chaotic conclusion to qualifying. That is the real meaning of Mercedes being in trouble. It was not one isolated mistake. It was not one simple penalty. The team had 2 drivers, 2 separate problems, and almost no time to create certainty before the race. The strategy team could not prepare one fixed plan for Antonelli until it knew where he would start. The engineers could not fully trust Russell's car until they understood why it stopped. Mercedes had shown speed, but the result was unstable. Antonelli was 4th, but possibly not for long. Russell was 7th, but the health of his car was uncertain. And the most remarkable part is that both situations were linked indirectly to Verstappen's spin. Verstappen created the yellow flags that placed Antonelli under investigation. The same chaotic ending affected the final phase of the session before Russell later stopped at turn 1. One Red Bull moment spread pressure across the Mercedes garage. And now Antonelli's strongest defense depended on proving something very specific. He did not need to prove that he lifted. The available reporting already indicates that he did. He needed to prove that the lift created a clearly perceptible reduction in speed. That is a much harder argument. Because the sector time works against him. The personal best suggests improvement.